So, really looking forward to today's discussion. We have with us in the virtual room, we have Gordon, who is co founder of Impact Central. It's an accelerator for faith in for profit businesses, and he's also co-founder of Chorus Network, an angel network. And we have Reuben in the house, and he is the director of international strategy at Faith Driven Investor and Entrepreneur. So I'm going to hand over to Gordon, and then you'll hear from Reuben. And please do use your virtual voices. If you have any questions, put them in the chat box, and we will field some questions afterwards. So over to you, Gordon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Camelle. And first of all, I just want to say thanks also to Ken and Peter for inviting me to speak today. It's a real privilege and an honor, and so glad to be here with all of you. I hope that some of my comments today will challenge you. To be blunt, I'm actually fine with making you a bit uncomfortable and possibly squirming a little bit in your seat. But if I'm prepared to do that, then I also think I need to hold myself to the same standard. So let me begin by confirming that I hold no judgments here. The questions I'm going to put forward, I've asked of myself, and I know some of them are extremely challenging. But I want to use the words of Rilke here, where he says, "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers, which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer." So what are some of these questions, and why are they so difficult? And you might think that I'm just talking about money and investing, but it's often said that, Jesus preached more about money than almost any other topic. 11 of the 39 parables use the term money or have to do with it. At least once a year on Giving Sunday, we hear a sermon on the topic, and you're going to be asked to donate to the church. And why do we do that? Well, of course, church is an organization that has staff and property. But what about mission? And, do you send Bibles to Africa? Do you feed the homeless? How much should you give? Do you tithe? Is it 10% pre-tax or post-tax? Do you tithe your capital gains on investments? Well, most of the time, I don't think that this is all about money. I actually think it's about soothing our conscience. People want the church to give them rules that they can follow so that they don't have to search for the answers more deeply. And this is not a new problem. In the 1850s, Soren Kierkegaard said the greatest enemy of Christianity is Christendom, which is the cultured and respectable Christianity of his day. According to Kierkegaard, the tragedy of easy Christianity is that existence has ceased to be an adventure and a constant risk in the presence of God, but has become a form of morality and a system. And I think it's important that he uses the word risk. This is one of the most discussed terms in modern finance, risk and return. If we take on more risk, then we should get more return. If a financial asset is correctly priced, then this principle must hold true. But what is risk? Well, when it comes to financial risk, I'm an expert. I've been a senior executive at institutions including Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and HSBC. And for 5 years, I ran my own hedge fund, where I also played the role of chief risk officer for FCA reporting. Well, for financial institutions, financial risk is actually not managed. It is avoided. Risk is typically defined as volatility. Standard practice is to look at past data, extrapolate that into the future, and apply some statistics. And reducing risk means safety, and that is smart investing. But what about risk and faith? Remember, Kierkegaard said, without risk in the presence of God, there is no adventure. So I have a Post-it note on my wall that I often read. And it quotes a well-known Christian leader who says, "If what you're trying to accomplish does not require prayer, then your ambition is not big enough." And I think that Jesus confirms that wholeheartedly when he talks about living life to the full. Living life to the full means being outside of our comfort zone. That means we have to trust God. So while the secular, and certainly the financial world in particular, tell us that risk is to be avoided at all costs, God is actually telling us that we need to embrace risk as a demonstration of our faith. Now, you might be thinking that I'm twisting things here a bit, and maybe to just point to that, I'll highlight a couple sections of scripture. So first in Mark 12:41 to 44, and this is where Jesus is standing opposite the offering plate at the temple and watches wealthy people put in large sums and then sees a poor woman put in two small coins. And Mark writes, calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on. Now, does anyone believe that according to today's social norms and financial wisdom, that the poor widow has acted prudently? We would consider her utterly reckless. Yet Jesus points her out to us as a demonstration of faith, not foolish neglect of financial risk. The second part of Scripture is also probably, I'm sure most people are familiar with, is called the parable of the rich fool, which is in Luke 12:15 to 21. And Luke writes, then he said to them, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. And I know those are challenging scriptures, but so again, I think it's a clear message from Jesus that we're not to, quote, play it safe and store up our wealth. But specifically, what does it mean to be rich toward God? Well, importantly, Jesus had no problem with investing. I'm not going to quote another scripture, but an easy one that comes to mind is the parable of the minas, or the parable of the talents. So now let's put ourselves in the shoes of those servants. Isn't this exactly what we're talking about when we talk about investing? You've made money from income or another investment, and now you're sitting on wealth. Since God gives us all things, we can agree that God has handed us this wealth. So what do? Well, just as an incentive, I want to remind you that if you bury it in the ground, then according to Jesus' parable in Matthew, you will be, quote, cast into outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So this is an urgent problem that we don't want to be kind of not considering. Outer darkness does not sound like a good place. I might decide that I'm going to invest my talent or mina into a Christian business. That should be okay, right? Surely that is acting, quote, rich in God. But that brings up the question of what is a Christian business? Well, one answer that I hear often is that a Christian business is one that is led by Christian founders or Christian managers who are living out their calling. And is that enough? Well, let me introduce you to Mr. Harrison as the CEO. He quotes Bible verses and says, quote, we want God's blessing upon the company. He brought the first chaplains into the company. He sees himself as chief steward who is accountable to God. He leads a giant company committed to serving customers, he says, in mind, body, and spirit, and that he has a mission to honor God in all we do. And that all sounds great, right? I mean, that is exactly the type of businesses we want, how we want people to lead businesses. But maybe the only problem is that he's actually the CEO of the world's largest Coca-Cola bottler. Now, does that matter? Well, Coca-Cola is the world's largest plastic polluter with a plastic footprint of 2.9 million tons per year. Now that number is kind of hard to fathom, but one number I've heard recently is that the amount of microplastics that have now seeped into the oceans result in us supposedly ingesting 5 grams of plastic each week. That's each of us. And that's about the size of one credit card. So in a report by The Guardian last month, they state that greenwashing by the largest consumer goods manufacturers is endemic. In their report, they write, "Our latest investigation exposes a litany of misleading claims from household names consumers should be able to trust." And I haven't even mentioned sugar. Now, I found in a 2010 report that the US consumes 14.4 pounds of sugar per capita from Coke each year. 14.4 pounds per person each year just from Coke. So how does that impact the obesity epidemic and diabetes? So, we might ask, would Jesus invest in Coke? Now, so where does that leave us? And what then is a Christian business that we can invest in? And is it even possible that a business can demonstrate the fruits of the Spirit? For example, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Now, I've been working on that answer, and I'm going to be honest. There's very few public companies that even get close to that definition, and perhaps there's not even that many that are even trying. But the good news is that there are companies that are trying, but they are mostly private. In fact, that is what I spend my time on. I help run an accelerator that works with impact startups, and those are for-profit companies that also have a social or environmental mission. That accelerator is called Impact Central, and when some of our program graduates move on, they also seek funding, and we work with Chorus Network, which is an angel network that focuses on impact investing. And Chorus also works with a fund called Opto, which also invests in impact startups. Now, they're all small. I know these are not large public companies. They're all small now, but their purpose is clear, and when they grow, they can change the world. But I want to end on one final piece of scripture, which should be a warning about not taking our investment decisions seriously, and the importance of acting true to God's purposes and avoiding the trap of what Kierkegaard called easy Christianity. So this is from Matthew 7 and comes right after Jesus says we'll be recognized by our fruit. "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many mighty works in your name?' And then will I declare to them, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness.'" So does God see our faith in our investments? Now, believe me, I find everything I've said very challenging, and I don't feel I have a right to judge anyone on how they ultimately make their investment decisions. But coming back to my first quote from Rilke, maybe by asking the questions, we can begin to live into the answers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gordon. That was excellent. And we're going to bring Reuben up onto the stage now. Thank you so much, Reuben, Director of International Strategy at Faith Driven Investor and Entrepreneur.
Brilliant. So good to be with you all. I see many familiar faces and good friends, but also many new friends. And so I've come at this journey, I guess, from the other end of the spectrum from Gordon. So Gordon comes from the world of investment and finance and has arrived at this place of beginning to ask these questions. I come from the world of impact and nonprofit. So I began my journey as a public health specialist with Tier Fund, and many of you will be familiar with it. And the first part of my career was spent living and working in humanitarian crises across Africa and Asia. I spent some years in Darfur, in Liberia, in Congo, northern Uganda. And after doing that for a while, I became really challenged of we could be doing this till kingdom come, and we would not fix all of the problems that we face. And in fact, the incredible good work that Tier Fund does, the healthcare, the education systems, are likely to fall apart when the aid community leaves, because who's going to spend money on propping up these systems? The local governments don't have it, and the private citizens don't have it. And the question I began to wrestle with and think about was, well, how do we work with business? How do we stimulate the economies in these countries? And I had two particular encounters which just, I guess, really deeply challenged me and changed the trajectory of my career. And the first was with an incredible businessman in Ireland. And he manufactures equipment for horses, so bridles, saddles, blankets. And I'd gone to meet him because I wanted him to write a check for the great ministry, the work of Tear Fund that we were doing, particularly to help women who were being rescued out of trafficking. And we wanted to help them get back on their feet. And as I talked to this man, he told me about his work and his factories. And I realized that actually his factories were in Cambodia, where we were trying to implement our Tear Fund project. And he was employing hundreds upon hundreds of men and women in his factories in Cambodia. But he'd never thought about his business as a vehicle for ministry. He said, well, the reason I'm in Cambodia is the labor force is cheap. And as we began to talk together, we realized that the impact his business could have was far greater than writing a check to Tear Fund. In fact, he could transform his entire supply chain and create livelihoods and dignity for so many more people. And that's what we did. We began that journey together. The power of business to transform lives, I realized, was immense. And yet, most business people have not given it a second thought. And the second meeting I had was when I began as CEO of Tear Fund in the Republic of Ireland. I decided I better set up a pension. And I was introduced to a pension advisor in my church, a lovely Christian man, and most of his clients were Christians in our community. And when we sat down together, I said, well, tell me what you've got. And he shared the pension plan with me. And as I looked at the businesses, it was Coca-Cola, it was British American Tobacco, and it was Lockheed Martin. It was invested in many things that I did not feel enthusiastic about or comfortable with as a Christian. And so I asked him, well, I was like, do you not have an ethical pension fund? And he looked at me and he said, no. He's like, I've never even heard of an ethical pension fund. What is that? And so I explained the basics. I was like, well, surely you have something that does good in the world, or at least doesn't do bad in the world. And he said, no, I've never come across this. You're the first person to ask me. And I was just blown away, shocked that this man had spent 30 years advising Christians. And I was the first person ever to ask him this question. And it took a very long time. We eventually found something, but I was amazed that as Christians were so often thoughtful maybe about the 10% that we give away, but we haven't given a thought to the 90% which we're investing and how we steward that capital. And so since then, that's about 15 years ago, I've spent my time working with entrepreneurs and with the investor community to help them think about what does it mean to live out our faith. And Gordon has just given us a great overview of some of the why. So I won't dive into that, but I will talk about some of the how, because often our hearts are motivated, we're stirred, we say, amen, that sounds incredible. And then we go, how on earth do we do this? This is really difficult. For most of us who aren't incredibly wealthy and have our own private family office for investing, getting involved and using our capital for good can be really tricky. So let me tell you a little bit about how we're serving the community of investors and supporting you to go on both the why journey and the how journey. So, as I mentioned, we want to help unlock the other 90% of finances and make sure that is used for kingdom good in the world. And I guess we think it begins with being descriptive, not proscriptive. It begins changing our heart posture. And someone asked me, well, what is a faith-driven investment? What does it look like? And there are many different definitions and criteria, but I guess I come back to a phrase that was used by a senator in the trial of Larry Flint of Hustler fame. And someone asked him, well, what is pornography? And he's like, I can't define it, but I know what it is when I see it. And I think it's the same with faith-driven investing, or to more positively phrase it, it's investment which makes the world rejoice. And so I want to know, when I put my capital to work, that the employees of that company rejoice. The customers of that company rejoices. The world rejoices because of the goods, the products, the impact that we are having through this. And the reverse is true, that the world would mourn if this company went out of business. And often when I use Amazon to order parcels or get in an Uber, I don't rejoice. It's handy, it's convenient, but I don't rejoice because I know that all of the impact these companies create is not what I would love to have. So firstly, the heart posture. We want to help people really understand their identity in Christ and his calling on their life. And as they begin to understand that, we want to help them to think and act differently. And so we've begun to pull together a course just to help people who are investors think about this. And we've got a new cohort of this course launching in January, and it's a video series, a bit like the Alpha course, a series of videos where you can watch together. You can hear stories of people who are doing this, whether it's in public markets or private markets, whether it's with a small amount of capital as an angel investor or a massive fund. But you can just see examples of what this looks like and wrestle with some of the issues and questions. And so we'd be delighted if that's something that's of interest to this community. We can share more about that and journey with you through that and help resource you to discuss some of these questions. We then also want to aggregate and help people find these opportunities. So when we started out, when we began talking about faith-driven investing, we often compared it to a Russian grocery store in the 1980s. You go into the grocery store and there's nothing on the shelves. You might think you want to buy something, but there's nothing available. And to be honest, even when we started out, we didn't know if there were really any customers available. And we said, well, we need to create a marketplace which allows supply of capital and need for capital to meet. And so we've built this technology platform which aggregates the best direct investments, so the best individual deals, and the best funds that we can find around the world, which are led by Christian entrepreneurs who are thoughtful and intentional about their impact. So if I go into the funds section of the website, you can look at many of these different funds. So there's a fund which is a venture capital fund in Nigeria, focused on poverty alleviation in West Africa, mostly investing in technology companies. You can invest in real estate companies which are bringing transformative housing to the poor and making sure that community is at the center of the developments that they do. You can invest in companies which have a focus on the 1040 window and have a real heart for seeing the good news spread across countries in the Middle East. You can invest in private equity companies, so pretty large private equity companies which are investing in middle market companies. So again, the spectrum of different types of investing is completely different. So it spans asset classes, it spans different approaches. And we help people use, whether it's geography or impact category, to find the deals which are really aligned with the call that God has on your life. So if you care about agriculture, or you care about homelessness, or you care about Kenya or the UK, we want to help you find the best fund managers or direct deals that you can and connect with those. So it's been incredibly exciting because we found out that actually these do exist. There are so many Christians in the marketplace actively managing funds and investing. The problem is often they don't put their faith, that label on their website on what they do. And so it can be hard to find them often. And so this brings together that different community. So far, we found about 40 funds worldwide. At any one time, we have about 350 companies raising direct investment. And we have about 500 families who are investing through this marketplace and growing. And so we're seeing incredible momentum. But often, if you look at this, you'll find that most of these deals are US based. So we love our cousins on the other side of the pond, and they've been pioneering this. And even here in the UK, people like Gordon have been pioneering this. But what does the market look like in the UK? Because we need to find things closer to home, which we can actually get involved in. And so I just put on this one slide some of the things that we've seen that we're excited about and collaborating with. So on the public market side, And two of our friends run Pensions for Purpose and Making My Money Matter. So Pensions for Purpose works with the pension fund industry to help them integrate environmental, social, and government issues in what they do. So they're an advocacy group for the pension fund industry and led by a wonderful Christian friend. And for those of you who are kind of looking for that ethical pension, saying, okay, well, that's where I want to start, Make My Money Matter helps you find an ethical pension fund which you can invest in. So not necessarily Christian per se, but will have values that you care about. Some people will say, well, actually, I'd like to get directly involved in private market investing. And as Gordon mentioned, there's a real opportunity there to build incredible purpose-driven companies and help them grow. And so we've come across incredible fund managers like Snowball, led by James Perry, a wonderful Christian friend, and that's a multi-asset vehicle. So that's a fund of funds investing in different asset classes. Resonance, which runs a series of funds, particularly in real estate, focusing on property, housing for homeless people or vulnerable women. And they've been doing incredible work all across the UK, again, led by Daniel Brewer and Simon Chisholm, amazing Christian men of faith, and just built an incredible team. They manage about 250 million pounds worth in their funds. There's Truestone, which is focused on investing in West Africa, particularly around Sierra Leone. And of course, there's Gordon's venture, Opto Impact Ventures, which is investing in venture capital style startups, which are really creating social and environmental impact. So there are beginning to be funds which are emerging here in the UK, and many more are coming online. And I'm really excited to see new funds which will come online early next year. Some people might say, well, look, I just want to get involved directly in investing. So a fund feels maybe one step removed. I'd like to kind of roll up my sleeves, get my hands dirty, and get involved with these businesses in the early stage. I've got skills and expertise which I can contribute. We've begun partnering with Gordon and Andy's angel investor network to create a Christian angel investor network. We only started it a few months ago, and we're already at about 40 angel investors meeting regularly and bringing the best opportunities that they're finding to our community and co-investing together, working and collaborating to get behind and back and support these businesses. And many of the investors aren't super wealthy, but as they pool their capital together, are really able to make a significant impact on some of the businesses that we're seeing. And some of these are credible. Like our last pitch day, we had a film production studios, which is creating both Christian and values-led content. And they're one of the main suppliers of children's content for the BBC. Really incredible Christian team behind it. Another one was working in wave energy and creating a renewable power through wave energy and an incredible technology that they're doing. A third one was doing co-working spaces, which can be used by churches and community centers to generate income for these places, but also to build strong local communities. And so there's just some incredible opportunities that we're seeing, and we definitely need more capital to get behind these businesses and more expertise. Stewardship is becoming actively involved in this. So if you have a donor advised fund through stewardship, you can now ask them to place your money and invest it on your behalf. And this takes advantage of the tax structures in the UK, which allow you to do that and get your charitable tax deduction. And there are opportunities to work more closely with stewardship in doing that. And friends of ours, crowdfunding is a really important opportunity. We have friends who run a crowdfunding platform which helps businesses raise small amounts of capital and nonprofits and social enterprises. Again, led by Christians who are really keen to say, how do we use the technology and resources that we have to connect people who need capital with those who have capital? And finally, just to mention, there are those of you who say, well, I don't have much capital. I may have skills, I may have expertise, but my capital at the moment is locked up. But you can use your skills. And I know that Impact Central is always looking for mentors to come alongside and work with their entrepreneurs. Duncan, who's on this call, runs Creo Ventures. based in Scotland, but supporting Christian entrepreneurs all across the UK and other parts of the world. Again, always looking for experienced business people to come and support their businesses on their growth journey and help disciple and enable them to grow. And finally, next year, we're going to launch the Rise Awards. And so this will be a competition celebrating the best Christian entrepreneurs in the UK. And we'll identify the ones which are having impact on creation, on their local community, and we'll celebrate those. And so we're going to launch this competition. It's a collaboration between 5 or 6 organizations, including Creo and Impact Central and Chorus, HTB Church in London. And we just really want to raise the profile because, again, so many people don't realize what is possible and what is happening in the UK. And we want to make this easy and accessible to everyone. So I'll send out some dates later, but here's some dates for your diary. 6th of December is our Angel Network. We're going to have a professional investors gathering in London on the 1st of December. And the Rise Awards will happen on the 25th of March. And finally, to say that we are running a conference in a few weeks' time, and some of it will be local to you, whether it's Oxford or London or Bristol, and would love to kind of get together and continue this journey with you. So we're here to serve you, to be a resource for you, and hopefully to see God's kingdom come as we use the other 90% of what God has given us to transform our nation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Reuben. That was powerful. Both Gordon and Reuben, thank you so much. Gordon, thank you for giving us the why, just making it really relatable, bringing it back to the scriptures for us, from the widow's mite to Jesus's strong views on investment. And Reuben as well, love how you gave us the how. It was great to even go to the website to actually see everything, how it works, where things are, get some real hands-on examples of different organizations and what they're doing and what they look like. So thank you both so much. We've got some great questions. Of the chat box is firing up today, so we're going to go through just a few questions, if I could knock them out before we head over into the breakout rooms. So one of the earlier questions, either of you could feel free to take this, is: can a business demonstrate the fruits of the Spirit?
I'll jump in there. Just I guess I feel that what's actually happened in the last 50 to 100 years is, if you look at what we've done as a society, we've actually created so much personality around corporations from a legal, branding, everything perspective. The question becomes, who's actually in charge of some of these multinational corporations? Certainly not. Shareholders are tiny. They don't seem to be able to influence it. The managers could be fired at any time. They get replaced. And also, certainly the board of directors moves around a lot. So it is an important question to then say, who's responsible for what the company represents? And I think that, it is something that needs to be asked of companies. In other words, if no one's asking the questions, they're veering towards definitely, some evil intentions at times, because they're just, without any question about how they're maximizing profit, they're destroying the environment and creating social injustice. So it seems like a strange comment to make. In other words, can a company act like a Christian? But I think that because what we have to be careful of is basically removing our responsibility and making companies our proxies, but not demanding that from our companies also. So it's kind of, I see it from the relevance being, yes, we have to act like Christians. A company can act like that, but we also have to demand that there's institutions and structures in place that ensure that the behavior of a company is being observed.
Awesome. Thank you, Reuben. Did you want to add to that?
I think very briefly, so ESG investing, environmental, social, and governance investing is coming under, I think, some criticism, and much of it is justified. So there's certainly ways that we can do better. And a lot of what we see is greenwashing. So can we kind of add on kind of a label, some marketing on the outside, but actually not reform business practices? And so I think we need both I guess, a heart transformation as well as a legal governance transformation. And those two things have to come hand in hand. If we just have the legal side, people find ways of bypassing it. And if we just have the heart side, often it doesn't get embedded and institutionalized. At the direct investment level, definitely do check out the work of James Water and Ido, who built on top of a lot of the existing impact measurement structures, but added some of the kind of the specifically Christian elements of measuring transformation and impact.
Awesome. Thank you. And we're going to go just a few more minutes because we've got quite a few questions. So we'll see how many more we can get through. Another one we've got is, does God see our faith with our investments?
I guess I think I understand the question, but I think it comes back to potentially the question of risk.
Yeah.
So normally when we weigh up an investment, we look at the return profile and we look at the risk profile, and then we decide whether it's a good decision or not. But the question is, well, what is our risk appetite? And that relates to our time horizon. And I think if we have a much longer time horizon, in the case of Christian, an eternal time horizon, it should change our risk appetite. And it should change how we think about the impact we create. And so I guess one thing which sometimes frustrates me is that we often see, even in the faith-driven investing space, that we don't see people's risk appetite increase because they feel that they can do good. We still see very conservative investing, which often I think misses opportunities for real transformation. And so I would love to challenge people, kind of think through your risk profile, your risk appetite, and at least with a portion of your portfolio, begin to take increased risks and see what God will do through that.
Awesome. Thank you, Reuben. We've got some more questions coming in the chat. As we said at the end, Reuben and Gordon may be around afterwards if your question hasn't been answered. We'll go for one more. This is an interesting one from Jerry. Do feel free to unmute, Jerry, if you wanted to elaborate. But it said, is tithing easy Christianity?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, I don't know what the exact percentage is, but it's a lot less than 10%, certainly on average, the Christian community. I think that, as I was saying in my comments earlier, I think that it represents a kind of a solution in terms of, oh, can I just write a check? And, and I think then there's a lot of rationalizing that goes around writing that check. And then once I've written that check, I'm good, and then everything else I do is like fine. And I think that's actually not, I think that's a kind of Old Testament versus New Testament point of view. I think, from a New Testament point of view, it would definitely be living holistically and looking at it as to how is everything that I'm doing showing that I love my neighbor? So all the businesses I invest in, all the things I support, those are having implications on people's lives. And so, am I responsible to know that the skincare company that I support is basically like the majority of that industry creating slave labor in Africa? So, is that my responsibility? I would say yes. I think that is our responsibility. These are, you start unraveling things pretty quickly when you start going into this, though.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you so much again, Reuben and Gordon. I'm going to hand over to Ken now, who's going to direct us to our breakout rooms where we can continue further with discussions. Thank you so much.